I never expected my best friend's mom to remember how I took my tea. Not the sugar part. Anyone could guess that, but the way I let it sit untouched for a minute before drinking it, like I was waiting for permission. Her name was Semina, though I almost never said it out loud. She was just Ayan's mom growing up. The woman who opened the door halfway during sleepovers, reminding us to keep the noise down. The one who left sliced fruit outside the room without knocking. Back then, she belonged to the background of my life. Now she lived directly upstairs from me. After her divorce, she rented out the lower portion of the house. Cheap rent, close to my university, walking distance from everything that didn't really matter. I moved in because it was practical. That's what I told everyone. Most evenings followed the same rhythm. I came home late, dropped my bag near the couch, scrolled through messages I didn't answer, heated leftovers, ate standing up. The TV stayed on even when I wasn't watching, just to make the silence feel less intentional. Around 10, I'd hear her footsteps overhead. Slow, measured, always the same path from kitchen to balcony. The first time she knocked on my door, I thought something was wrong. She stood there holding a thermos. Made too much tea, she said, lifting it slightly. You want some? She didn't wait for an answer. Just walked in like mothers do, not intrusive, just certain. That became our routine. Tea at night. Sometimes 5 minutes. Sometimes an hour. We talked about ordinary things. Electricity bills. Ayan calling less often since moving abroad. My classes. Her plants dying despite expert-level care, as she called it. Nothing important. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. One night, she laughed at something I said. Really laughed, head tilted back slightly, and then stopped mid-laugh like she remembered she wasn't supposed to enjoy it that much. Her fingers tightened around the cup. I noticed small things after that. The way she tucked loose hair behind her ear when she listened carefully. How she never sat fully back against the chair, always slightly forward, as if ready to leave before staying too long. How her eyes lingered half a second longer than necessary when handing me something. I started noticing myself too, waiting for footsteps upstairs, delaying dinner just in case she knocked, typing messages to friends and deleting them because explaining this felt impossible. Loneliness isn't loud. It's repetitive. It's reheating tea you don't want. It's checking your phone without expecting anything new. It's realizing someone asking, "Have you eaten?" can feel heavier than it should. One evening the power went out across the neighborhood. The house fell into that strange, shared darkness where every sound becomes personal. A soft knock followed. She stood there with candles. "Feels weird sitting alone upstairs," she said. "Mind if I stay here until the lights come back?" We sat across from each other, candlelight moving across her face. Outside, generators hummed. Somewhere a dog barked endlessly. She watched the flame for a long time before speaking. "You've grown up," she said quietly. I didn't know how to respond, so I folded the edge of a napkin again and again until it became a thin square. Her eyes followed my hands. Then she smiled, not warmly, not politely, but like she'd noticed something she shouldn't have. The lights returned suddenly. She stood up almost immediately. "Good night," she said, already halfway to the door. At the threshold, she hesitated. Just a second, like she wanted to say something else. But she didn't. That night, long after her footsteps disappeared upstairs, my phone buzzed. A message from her. Not about rent. Not about tea. Not about anything normal. "Are you awake?" And for the first time since moving into that house, I wasn't sure what answering would change. I stared at her message longer than I should have. "Are you awake?" The typing bubble never appeared again. Just that one line sitting there, quiet but heavy, like it already knew I'd overthink it. I replied after a minute. "Yeah." Another pause. Then, "Could you come upstairs for a minute? The kitchen light won't turn off." It was such a normal excuse that it almost felt rehearsed. Her door was already open when I reached the top of the stairs. Warm yellow light spilled into the hallway. She stood near the switchboard, arms crossed loosely, looking mildly annoyed. "It's been flickering all evening," she said. "I think I broke it." I checked the switch. Perfectly fine. One press and the light went off. We both noticed it at the same time. She laughed softly, so I didn't actually need help. I shrugged. Happens. But neither of us moved toward the door. Her upstairs portion felt different from mine, quieter, more lived in. Books stacked unevenly. A half-finished puzzle on the dining table. A shawl draped over a chair, like someone had left mid-thought. She poured tea without asking. We stood by the kitchen counter instead of sitting. Close enough that I could smell jasmine soap on her hands. I used to hate nights, she said suddenly, stirring her cup even after the sugar dissolved. After the divorce, everything felt louder, even silence. She smiled like she regretted saying it. I shouldn't dump adult problems on you. You're not dumping, I said. You're just talking. She looked at me carefully then, like she was measuring something invisible. You were always quiet, she said, even when you came over as kids. Ayan talked. You listened. I laughed lightly. I still do that. She nodded. Yes. You notice things. Her gaze dropped to my hands, resting on the counter. I became very aware of where they were, how still they looked. I think people underestimate loneliness, she added. They assume it disappears once you grow older. I wanted to say something wise, something comforting. Instead, I admitted the first honest thing that came to mind. I thought it disappeared once you had people. She looked up quickly. That landed somewhere between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere upstairs, or maybe inside my chest, something felt unsettled. My brain started listing reasons this was wrong. She was my friend's mother. She had known me as a teenager. There was an entire decade between our lives that couldn't be erased by shared tea. And yet, I imagined staying longer, sitting at that table every night, becoming part of her routines the way she had quietly become part of mine. The thought scared me enough that I picked up my cup just to do something with my hands. She noticed. You're uncomfortable, she said gently. No, I said too quickly. Then softer, just thinking. She smiled at that, understanding more than I explained. As I turned to leave, she walked me to the doorway. Our conversation had returned to safe topics, but the air hadn't. At the threshold, she reached out and brushed something from my shoulder. Lint, probably nothing. Her fingers lingered half a second longer than necessary. Not inappropriate, not accidental either. She met my eyes, amused and almost shy. Good night, she said. I nodded, suddenly unsure how to stand, where to look, how normal people left rooms after moments like that. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that night upstairs, things didn't change immediately, which somehow made it worse. Our routine continued. Tea, short conversations, shared silences, but now every moment felt aware of itself. Like we were both pretending nothing had shifted while carefully stepping around something fragile. She knocked less often. Instead, she'd text first. Thea, you home? I made too much again. The excuses became smaller. The pauses longer. I started noticing hesitation in her. She'd sit farther away, laugh quickly, then look down at her cup as if correcting herself. Sometimes she ended conversations early, standing up mid-sentence with a sudden, practical reason. I should sleep. Early morning tomorrow. Too much tea isn't good anyway. But her eyes never agreed with her exits. One evening I came home earlier than usual and found her in the courtyard trying to fix a loose clothesline. Her sleeves were rolled up, hair tied messily, frustration written across her face. You're going to hurt your hands, I said. She glanced up, surprised. I was managing. Still, she stepped aside. I tightened the knot while she held the line steady. Our hands brushed once, just briefly, and she pulled back faster than necessary. Thank you, she said, overly formal. We stood there afterward, neither leaving. The sunset turned the walls orange. Laundry swayed gently between us like a curtain we didn't know how to move past. She cleared her throat. Ayan called yesterday. Something in her tone made me pause. He asked about you, she added. Said you never replied to his messages anymore. Guilt flickered through me. I hadn't realized how long it had been. What did you tell him? Her lips curved faintly. That you're busy. A beat passed. Then another. And that you've grown up. The way she said it felt heavier this time. Less observational. More careful. Footsteps sounded near the gate. Our neighbor walked past, offering a casual greeting, eyes lingering just a moment too long on the two of us standing close together. Samina immediately stepped back. The distance appeared so quickly it felt rehearsed. I should go inside, she said. Her voice carried that polite boundary again, the one she used when reminding herself who I was supposed to be. That night, there was no tea invitation, no message, just silence upstairs. I told myself it was better this way. Cleaner, normal. But around midnight, I heard movement above me. Slow pacing, a chair shifting, then quiet again. Without thinking, I walked upstairs. I knocked once. She opened the door almost instantly, like she'd been standing there already. Her eyes looked tired, not from sleep, from thinking too much. "Everything okay?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yes, I just couldn't sleep." Neither of us mentioned that I couldn't either. We sat on opposite ends of the sofa. The TV played something neither of us watched. The room felt smaller than before. At some point, she laughed softly at a scene on screen and leaned closer to show me something, her shoulder brushing mine. She didn't move away immediately. Neither did I. The air changed, quiet but undeniable. My heart started doing something uneven. She noticed. I could tell by the way her breathing slowed, like she was deciding something. Her hand rested near mine on the couch cushion. Close enough. If either of us moved an inch, she turned toward me. I turned too, our faces closer than they had ever been. Her eyes searching mine, unsure, vulnerable, almost asking permission. For a second, the world narrowed to breath and hesitation. Then she stopped, a small inhale, and she pulled back. After that night, she avoided being alone with me. Not obviously, not coldly, just carefully. Tea stopped happening upstairs. Conversations moved to doorways. She kept physical distance the way people do when they're afraid proximity might reveal too much. I told myself I understood. Still, the absence felt louder than anything we'd shared. 3 days passed like that. On the fourth evening, I came home to find her sitting outside on the small bench near the gate, wrapped in a light shawl despite the warm air. A grocery bag rested beside her, untouched. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. "Oh," she said, almost relieved. "You're back early." I nodded. "You waiting for someone?" She shook her head. "Just needed air." I sat at the far end of the bench. Enough space to feel respectful. Too much space to feel honest. Cars passed slowly down the street. Somewhere nearby, children argued over a cricket bat. Ordinary sounds filling the silence neither of us seemed ready to break. After a while, she spoke. "You should spend more time with people your age." The sentence landed softly, but didn't feel casual. "I do," I said. She gave me a look that said she knew I was lying. "You shouldn't sit with me every evening," she added. "It's not healthy." Her hands twisted the edge of her shawl, a small nervous movement I'd started recognizing. I watched her for a moment. "You're the one who stopped," I said quietly. She exhaled, eyes dropping to the ground. "Yes." No explanation. Just that. The honesty surprised me more than denial would have. We sat in silence again. The streetlight flickered on above us, casting uneven shadows across her face. "I forget sometimes," she said after a long pause, "how young you are." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it hurt. "And I forget," I replied, "that you only see me as Ayan's friend." Her head turned quickly toward me. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." The words came out steadier than I felt. My heart was racing, but my voice stayed calm, almost detached. She looked shaken now, like a wall she'd been holding up was starting to crack. "That's not what this is," she said softly. "Then what is it?" The question hung between us, heavier than anything we'd said before. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her eyes searched mine, conflicted, tired, honest in a way that felt almost painful to witness. "I like talking to you," she admitted. "Too much, maybe." Her voice lowered. "You listen. You notice when I'm quiet. You make the house feel less empty." She swallowed. "And that scares me." A car drove past, headlights sweeping over us briefly, exposing the closeness we'd slowly allowed again. I felt something shift inside me. Jealousy, maybe. Fear that she'd push me away completely. Fear that I mattered only as a temporary comfort. "I'm not a kid," I said. "I know," she whispered. "That's the problem." Her hand moved unconsciously, resting on the bench between us, close enough that our fingers nearly touched. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The air felt fragile, stretched thin by everything unsaid. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. I wanted to ask how. I wanted to ask why she thought distance would help. Instead, I turned slightly toward her, close enough to feel her breath catch. Her gaze dropped to my lips for just a second before lifting again. The world went quiet. No cars, no voices, just the sound of two people realizing the next moment might change everything. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, one question lingered between us, spoken or not. If we crossed this line, what would we lose? The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. No lingering looks. No cuernis. Just normal. Too normal. She greeted me from the staircase while watering her plants. "Morning," she said lightly. "Don't forget rent is due next week." I nodded, confused by the casual tone. The bench conversation felt distant suddenly, like I'd imagined it under bad lighting. For 2 days, she stayed busy. Doors closed. Phone calls behind walls. Errands that lasted longer than necessary. When we crossed paths, she smiled politely, warm but contained, the way she used to when I was just her son's friend visiting after school. The distance wasn't loud. It was precise. I told myself she needed space, that adults handled complicated feelings quietly. Still, I found myself waiting for footsteps again and realizing they never paused outside my door anymore. On the third evening, I came home to unfamiliar shoes near the entrance upstairs. Men's shoes. Older. Formal. Voices drifted down faintly. A man laughing softly. Her voice answering, careful, courteous. I stood there longer than I should have, keys still in my hand. The laugh came again. Something inside me tightened in a way I hadn't prepared for. Later that night, when the house finally grew quiet, she knocked on my door. I opened it immediately. She looked composed. Hair neatly tied. Expression neutral. "My ex-husband came by," she said before I could ask. "We needed to discuss some paperwork." The explanation arrived too quickly. "Oh," I said. She nodded, eyes avoiding mine. "He might visit occasionally. Just wanted you to know." I forced a small smile. "You don't have to explain." But she did explain, not with words but with distance. She didn't step inside, didn't offer tea, didn't linger. For a moment, it felt like we were strangers sharing the same address. "I think," she added carefully, "we should keep things simple." Simple. The word sat heavily between us. I nodded again, even though I didn't know what agreement I was consenting to. She gave a polite smile, the kind meant to close conversations, and turned back toward the stairs. Her footsteps sounded deliberate. Final. That night, I noticed something else. The upstairs balcony light stayed on late. Shadows moved back and forth. Phone conversations stretching into midnight. And then silence. The routines we built disappeared almost overnight. I started coming home later, eating outside more, pretending the empty evenings didn't bother me. Once, I typed a message. Did I do something wrong? I stared at it for a long time, deleted it. Another night, I almost knocked on her door. My hand even lifted halfway before I stopped myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe what we felt had only existed because loneliness makes temporary things feel permanent. Days passed. The bench outside remained empty. The thermos never appeared again. One evening I returned home and found a small plate covered with foil near my door. Homemade food. No note. Just quiet care delivered anonymously. I stood there holding it, unsure whether it meant goodbye or apology. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It rained the night, everything finally settled. Not heavy rain, just steady enough to make the streetlights blur and keep people indoors. The kind of weather that makes a house feel smaller and thoughts louder. I came home earlier than usual, shoes damp, mind tired from pretending I wasn't waiting for something to change. Her balcony light was off. For a moment, I felt relief. Then disappointment followed immediately after. I unlocked my door and stopped. She was sitting on the staircase between our floors. Not upstairs, not downstairs. In between. A mug rested in her hands, untouched. She looked up when she heard me, like she'd been listening for my footsteps. "Hi," she said softly. "E." I stood there, unsure whether to move closer or keep walking. The distance between us felt symbolic now, almost intentional. "I wasn't sure if you'd come home early," she said. "I wasn't sure you'd be here." A faint smile crossed her face, tired, honest. She gestured toward the step beside her. I sat down, leaving a respectful gap. Rain tapped faintly against the windows behind us. For a while, neither of us spoke, just breathing, sharing space again after weeks of absence. "I handled things badly," she said at last. Her voice didn't ask for sympathy. It sounded like someone admitting a truth they'd already argued with themselves about. "I got scared," she continued. "Not of you, of myself." I watched her hands tighten around the mug. After my marriage ended, I promised myself I wouldn't depend on anyone again. And then, she paused, searching for words. "You started feeling important to my day." She laughed quietly, almost embarrassed. "That shouldn't have happened." I swallowed. "It already did." She nodded slowly. "Yes." The simplicity of the agreement felt heavier than any confession. "I kept thinking," she said, "what would people say? What would Ayan think? What happens when you move on with your life, and I'm just a phase you live through?" Her honesty stung because I had asked myself the same question. "I didn't want to hurt you," she added. "And pushing me away didn't hurt." I asked gently. She looked at me then, really looked, eyes soft but unguarded. I thought distance would make it easier. It didn't. She exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly, like she'd been holding tension for weeks. Rain filled the silence again. I realized this was the moment, the choice. Say everything or let it remain unfinished forever. "I wasn't lonely before moving here," I said slowly. "At least I didn't notice it. Then you started knocking with tea, and suddenly the days felt different." My voice faltered, but I kept going. "I don't know what this is supposed to be. I just know I missed you." The words hung between us, fragile and irreversible. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she set the mug down beside her and let her hand rest on the step between us. Not reaching, just available. After a second, I placed my hand there too. Our fingers touched lightly. No urgency, no ruse. Just warmth confirming something real had existed all along. She smiled, small, relieved, almost grateful. "We don't have to decide everything tonight," she said. I nodded. "Okay." And for the first time since all of this began, the silence between us didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like understanding. Some things didn't change after that night on the staircase. And somehow, that's how I knew everything had. There was no sudden transformation. No dramatic decision announced over breakfast. The house simply settled into a new rhythm, quieter, steadier, like two people learning how to walk beside each other without rushing ahead. Tea returned first. Not every night, just often enough. Sometimes she knocked. Sometimes I went upstairs. Sometimes we sat outside on the bench near the gate, watching evening traffic like it was a shared television channel neither of us needed to comment on. We stopped pretending the moments were accidental. Weeks passed, then months. The boundaries didn't disappear. They softened. She still reminded me to eat properly. I still fixed things around the house she claimed weren't broken. Conversations stretched longer, deeper, then drifted back to ordinary topics again. Life didn't become romantic. It became familiar. One morning at 8:47 a.m., I found her in the kitchen holding 2 mugs, tea for herself, black coffee for me. She handed mine over without asking. "You always look half awake at this time," she said. "You always notice," I replied. She smiled at that, the same quiet smile that once felt dangerous and now felt like home. Ayan visited once that winter. I expected tension, questions, suspicion. Instead, nothing dramatic happened. We were careful, respectful, not hiding, not announcing, just existing naturally. Samina laughed more that week. I realized then that whatever we were building didn't need labels to feel real. It only needed honesty. The bench outside became ours without discussion. Some evenings we talked about memories. Other evenings we sat in comfortable silence, watching neighbors pass by. Her shoulder would occasionally lean against mine, small contact, never theatrical. Once, during a light drizzle, she said, I don't feel lonely in this house anymore. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly rearranging people until they fit differently into each other's lives. I graduated, found work nearby, instead of moving away like I once planned. She restarted hobbies she had abandoned years ago. The house filled with small sounds again. Music from upstairs, laughter drifting down the staircase, shared meals that no longer needed excuses. We never revisited the line we almost crossed that first night. We didn't have to. What grew between us wasn't built from one moment of passion, but from hundreds of ordinary ones that stayed. One evening, long after sunset, we sat with tea growing cold between our hands. She glanced at me and said, almost teasing, "You still wait before drinking it." I laughed softly. "You noticed that from the beginning." "I notice everything about you," she said, simple, unguarded. No dramatic pause followed. No overwhelming. Just truth placed gently between us. I realized then that love, at least ours, didn't arrive loudly. It settled in slowly, until leaving would feel stranger than staying. The streetlights flickered on. Her hand found mine naturally, like it had learned the way without thinking. And I understood something only the two of us really knew. We hadn't destroyed anything. We had simply chosen not to walk away for the quiet place where we were finally seen. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?